A very good morning to all of you and welcome. Pleased to have all of you with us today. So the year is about to end and this is our final webinar session for the year. Hence, we thought that it would be nice to cover a summary of all the common migration pathways that you all would have heard about other than skill migration. So today we have put together for you a real compact and informative session, and we really hope that you are going to find it beneficial. All right. So before we start, for the benefit of those who are here for the first time, I would just like to introduce the company to you. Yeah. Okay, so Global Migration Solutions, we are based in Kuala Lumpur, and ANZ Migrate is based in Singapore. We have been the pioneers in Australia and New Zealand migration since 2003, 2004. And over the years, we have diversified into other programs as well due to market demand, such as Portugal, which is an investment pathway. US is also an investment pathway. And we also do Malaysia, our second home. So we are proud to carry ourselves as a premier migration advisory firm. This comes with practicing the right migration, advocating the right migration practices. Over this past 16 years, we have had a 99.9% success record, and this only comes due to our thorough review process and ensuring all the legislative requirements are met. We have helped 12,000 families migrate to Australia successfully, and we are hoping that this number would continue to grow, and we are positive that this number will grow as well. We have 5 offices across Asia Pacific, which is in KL, Singapore, Vietnam, Australia, and Hong Kong. We have also been awarded the Top 50 Global Migration CEO Award. Okay, now let me present to you the speakers for today. The first presenter for today is Desmond Ang. All right, Desmond, you want to just say hi?
Hi, everyone. Good morning to all. My name is Desmond.
Yes, thank you, Desmond. So Desmond is the licensed migration advisor, and he's the founder of Global Migration Solutions, which is based in KL. He has won the Top 50 Global Migration Agency Award in 2019 and 2018. And Desmond's previous expertise is a chartered accountant, and he has been with PwC for 8 years before he went into migration. This is his award. All right, and our second presenter for today is James Allen Hall, who is the founder of ANZ Migrate. So he is also now the trainer for migration agents, where he has been conducting various CPD programs for registered migration agents. As a pioneer in the industry, he has more than 17 years of experience in the migration scene. He has also been awarded the Top 25 Global Migration CEO. And before James came into the migration industry, he had a corporate career in IT and was working as a certified program manager with IBM. All right, James, would you like to just say hi?
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Okay, so both Desmond and James work closely on a day-to-day basis, providing expert and accurate migration advice to any clients. So combined, James and Desmond has over 30 years of experience in the migration scene, and with their wide knowledge, they are often invited to speak in international migration events, as what you can see here. There are many international events that James and Desmond has been featured. So this is just a bit of background about the speakers that you'll be listening from today. So I'm very sure that this session is going to be so informative. So please stay back and enjoy the session. All right. We'll just now walk you through the before that, just to share with you, it is one gentle reminder. It is always important to deal with a registered migration agent to represent your case, okay? And how can you verify that the agent is still current in their licensing? Is you can actually visit this website, which is the Office of Migration Agents Registration Authority. You'll be able to see James' license and also Desmond's license here, okay? Now let's move on to the agenda for today. So for today's agenda, what we'll be looking at first would be the latest migration outlook for 2020-2021, following the budget that was just released in October. general skill migration pathway, business investment pathway, and later we'll be talking about global talent pathway, employer sponsorship pathway, and student visa pathway. Once we're done with all this, we'll also be having a Q&A session at the end. Okay? So without further ado, Desmond, I'll pass it on to you.
Sure. Hi, thanks, Audrey, and thank you for the introduction. The setting for today is slightly different. I'm not sure if everybody see me in the video, but I'm just going to carry on, yeah? Now, first of all, let me just set this off. Yeah. All right. Now, first of all, I would like to just touch a little bit on the migration budget this fiscal year. This budget was just announced in October. Uh, as usual, usually the migration budget usually was announced in July, but because due to the pandemic this fiscal year, it was being delayed until October. So it was a long waiting budgets that everybody was waiting for. But the good news is the migration planning level remains the same as 160,000. So there was so much of of predictions whether or not the Australian migrations would reduce the migration quota and all. And it was such a relief, and it was a pleasure to see the Australia continue to require or to need the migrants and to fill up the 160,000 places this year. So, of course, it is every year there's slightly difference in terms of the focus and the trend. This year, the Australian government decided to focus on bringing in the high value investor, and they are expecting to either start a business or to focus on the investment, whereby this money is going towards the economy recovery and importantly creating the jobs. Now, let's look into how these 160,000 budgets are being allocated among the programs. Obviously, we have mentioned earlier, the focus this year is on the high value investor as well as the job creation. So as you can see over here, the first program, business and investment migration programs, the number was increased from 6,862 to almost doubling up to 13,500. Yeah. So the federal government had also allocated the quota throughout the respective states just 3 days ago. So we are expecting to see all the states are opening up very soon and start accepting the nomination application. And I would expect that this is coming up very soon. In fact, Queensland has already started doing so yesterday. Now, also the next programs that receive a higher quota is global talent. So later, my colleague James Allen Hall, he's going to be talking and share with you more about the global talent as well as the distinguished talent. Another programs that receive higher quota is the family stream, whereby it covers partner visa, the parents visa, the child visa. Obviously, when all other programs has higher quota, there would be some programs that receive a lower quota, which is on the general skill migration. Okay, but it doesn't mean that this is a dead end for general skill migration. For those is onshore or those who is planning, so we would be able to advise you on how to perhaps tap into the study pathway to increase your chances of getting the PR through the general skill migration programs. Okay, now, so that is a quick summary on how the 160,000 is being allocated among all the programs. Now, in short, so this Global Talent and Business and Investment Migration Program is the winner for this fiscal year, and these two programs are getting higher quota. So in terms of the skill migration, although it is a reduction, but this quota, the good thing is it is left with 9 months, where it runs from October to June, to have this quota left, which is 50,000 still allocation was given to these skill migration programs. So also for those who is onshore, who is based in Australia at the moment, also has the advantage of getting, the PR through the skill migration programs, because this is also a lot of the focus from the state's government, to offer the nomination to those who is already based in Australia. Okay, now I'm going to walk you through the skill migration and the business migration. First, let's start with the skill migration pathway. For those who is exploring these programs, first of all, you must be below 45 years old. So this is very important. Yeah. And these programs comes with a point system. The minimum point is 65, but just for your knowledge, the 65 really doesn't mean anything anymore at this point of times. So the more point you have, the higher chances you have towards getting your PR through. Yeah. But of course, we have to match your skill against the Australian occupational list. Under these programs, you have to have a migratable skill that is being acceptable, by the Australian government. And we will assess and look into your experience and your qualification, and determine whether or not you have a skill set that is suitable under these programs. Also, not only the skill that you must have, you must also receive an invitation in order to complete the whole process of this to get your residency. So later on, I'll have a slides that walk you through the various stages so that you could have a better understanding. So these are the four important basic requirements for someone who is looking at the general skill migration programs. Okay, now literally under these programs, right, there are three different pathways. The first pathway is subclass 189. So we call this skill independent visa. So for those who is exploring these visa programs, you must have a skill set that comes under the medium to long term skill shortage list. And this is a direct PR pathway. When the visa is approved and you obtain your PR status right away. Okay. So over the years, over the most recent year, we have seen those who go through these programs literally have to score a very high score. Now, I mentioned that earlier, the minimum score is 65, but I've seen to certain occupation, you would require at least 95, 90 or 95 in order to be considered, or in order to stand a chance to be invited to apply for this visa. Okay, so we also have the next pathway, which is the subclass 190 nomination through the states. So under these programs, you must obtain a nomination from the respective states. And how does it work is every state will come up with the occupation that's needed by the respective states. And you have to have a skill set that matches that. All right. Now, we have seen the direction towards these programs under this subclass 190. The priority is given to those who is already been based in Australia, which is onshore. So for those who go through, those who has graduated, yeah, or those who is under, other visa programs, temporarily working in Australia at the moment. So their chances of obtaining this 190 is higher than those who is offshore, yeah, who is not yet in Australia. All right. Now, what about for those who is offshore, who is not in Australia? So this subclass 490 is a programs that you are likely going to meet the requirements. The minimum point is 65. Yes, of course, it is very important that you have to have a skill set that is needed. So under this 490 is also a nomination from the states, but also it covers the family sponsorship. Yeah. Now, most of the people get through the 490 through the state's nomination. The quota, there isn't a quota allocated under the family sponsorship. If the 50,000 quota that we have seen earlier is all used up under by 189, 190. Okay, the family sponsorship will only be exercised if there's a quota left, yeah, over, which I don't think the case. All right. Now, this 491 is a TR pathway, temporary residence. So this is also a direction of the Australian immigration to move all migrants into a temporary residence over the time. And we have seen the Australian government has started off with the skill program and moving people into the temporary residence, which we are expecting, all the direct PR pathway is going to be phased off, over the times. But of course, it doesn't mean that, you are not getting the PR. It's just that everybody is going through a temporary residence, having to meet certain requirements before you get your PR status. Okay, now this will this chart explain what are the steps that you're going through. First of all, skill assessment. This is the mandatory steps that every skill migrants will have to go through, right? For example, now if you're an engineer, you need to assess your skill and your qualification through Engineers Australia. If you're an IT professional, it has to be assessed through Australia Computer Society. Likewise, there are so many occupations. So each of these occupations are being assessed by the respective assessing authority. So the common requirements over the skill assessment is towards your qualification and your experience to see if you acquire both, that is going to be assessed as having a skill that's needed by Australia or not. Okay. So for example, somebody might be working as an accountant, have a full experience handling the full sets of accounts, advising the company or the management in terms of handling the full financial reporting. But if their qualification is just a diploma in accounting, that would not qualify you, or that would not get you through the skill assessment, because the requirements over here for being an accountant, you should have a bachelor degree as well as the experience. Okay, so this is just an example. So we have to get you through. So it is important for you to speak to us so that when we look into your qualification, and we will determine whether or not you can meet the requirements. Okay. Another aspect to highlight over here is when your qualification is a bachelor degree, that doesn't automatically consider as a bachelor degree that is equivalent to the Australian standards. We have to again check and assess to make sure that your degree is being assessed as comparable to the Australian standards. Yeah. So this is very common if some of the qualification is from Malaysia, some of the qualifications from Philippines, some of the qualifications are from those countries that has thousands of the university, thousands of different level of the education standards. And this assessment and checks is very important. So after you have completed the skill assessment, you're moving into the second stage of EOI selection. So when it comes to this EOI selection, depending on which pathway that you are going through, whether it is 189 or 190 or 491. So the selection for 189 earlier, I've mentioned, some of the occupation has gone up to 95 points. Yeah. So the competition is great under the 189. And if it is a 190 and 491, and again, those who is onshore has an advantage to that. So if you're offshore, there could be chances of you getting a nomination based upon the 491. Okay. Now, it is the invitation that lead you to the third steps, which is the visa application. So that says if you do not receive an invitation, then you will not be able to move on to the third steps. All right. Now, when you lodge your application, it doesn't guarantee, the approval. Reason being, there is also a medical checkup. Yeah, there's also a criminal records checks. But of course, this health check generally cover critical illnesses like cancer, kidney failure, and HIV or TB. A common problem like cholesterol, diabetic, high blood pressure, these are all acceptable. All right. Now, so our role, we play an important role over steps 1, steps 2, steps 3, because we are assessing your criteria and your backgrounds against the possibility of you completing 1, 2, and 3 successfully. So we are very transparent and very open to all the clients that we have met. Should we see them having a very low chances, we are very open to let them know whether or not it is worth moving into that process at all. Okay. Now, if you are under 491, then you are going through stage 4. If you are 189 or 190, then you move from stage 3 to stage 5 directly. Okay. So now I think it's the poll time. Before I move into the business and investment migration programs, I think there's a question that would like everybody to participate. Yeah. So Ori, over to you, please. Yeah, so the question over here is, are you eligible to meet the basic requirements for skill migration pathway? So if you are thinking, well, I mean, based upon the information that we have discussed, do you foresee yourself as meeting the requirements? Yeah, we would like to have a quick poll, yeah, to see what do you think about yourself. So perhaps we just take up to uh, 40 minutes to get the results. Yeah, time's up. Okay, so 53% of the people do think that they might meet the requirements, and the other 25% are not certain, and the other 25% don't think that they meet the requirements. I would think that, on average, well, this is a good indication, but I would think that on average, uh, every 10 people that who speaks to us, or every 10 people that we have access, we generally find 3 to 4 people stand the chances of moving the application through. Yeah. So the skill migration, also, of course, we are also taking into consideration of the current budget directions, yeah, and the skill assessment that is being completed and the validity periods. And yeah, we, just for your information, we literally find around 30 to 40% of the people, they are able to move forwards with these programs out of the 10s. All right, thank you. Now, let's go on to the next programs. Some of you might be able to obtain your residency through the business and investment programs pathway if it is not a skill migration, especially those who has already passed the 45 years old, all right? And if you are a business owner or you're an investor, you have already accumulated to certain amount of the wealth, then the next programs would be something that is worth exploring for you and your family member. All right, now let me just get rid of the poll question. All right, now this one page summarizes the entire options that's available under the business and investment programs. As you can see, under these programs, there are 3 pathways under 188, which call 188A, 188B, and 188C. Yeah, we differentiate them with by A, B, and C. There's also a pathway under subclass 132. Okay, let me start you off with the 188 programs. Yeah, if you're looking at this 188, when you look at the 188, these represent a provisional visa, meaning any one of these 3 options will provide you and your family member with a temporary residence visa status first. Okay, now under the 188A, this is called business innovation. Under these programs, you're required to start up a business in Australia after the visa is granted. Now, all these programs that is run by Australia, that are being offered by Australia, is highly regulated. You are not required to start a business or to invest until your visa is approved. So it is based upon a set of the requirement that will qualify you for the 188. Okay. For those who is exploring to apply under 188A business innovation visa, first of all, you must already be a business owner yourself. There are certain criteria such as, you have to have at least 2 years of the business experience, and your business turnover has to achieve certain amount of the turnover, and you must hold certain percentage of the share, yeah, and you must have a minimum 800,000 Aussie dollar net worth. This consists of all your property, all your savings, all your share, okay, for you to be eligible to apply for the 188A. So it is based upon these sets of requirements which qualify you to apply, and later on, it takes you around another 30 months to get a visa. And after the visa is granted, then you move over to Australia, where your full residency of you and your family starts immediately, where they can go over, to study, and you can be employed in Australia, well, one of you, between the husband and wife, one of you must be setting up a business and run a business. All right. The investment is ranging between 200 to 500,000. Okay. Now, talking about going over to Australia, during this border control, many international students are unable to return back to Australia. But should you hold 188 visa, your child is allowed to return back to Australia without control. All right. So the needs of having this residency, especially during this pandemic time, the needs is increasing because many of the students or international students would not be able to return back. Yeah, the border restriction is still imposed at this point of time. All right. Now, if you are not running a business and you are not a business owner, then you can move on, to explore this 1AA visa. It's called investor stream. Under these programs, it is a very straightforward program. We are required to invest 1.5 million into the government bond, and you must have an asset value worth 2.25 million Aussie dollar. Okay. Now, as for 1AA, it is even more straightforward programs. You're required to demonstrate you have assets worth 5 million, and then you're investing 5 million into the compliant investment. Okay. These literally are in equities investment. Okay. So other than the 188C provisional visa, 132A, the business talent permanent visa pathway, is the only one that offer a PR, a direct PR status. So this is a big brother of 188A. Literally, you must be running also, you must already be a business owner. You must have a turnover of 3 million Aussie dollar, and you are required to invest ranging 1 million to 2.5 million in Australia when the visa is approved. Okay, now this is the first round that I do a very quick summary, given that we have many topics to cover. For those who wants to find out more information, please do contact us. Yeah. Now, talking about these 4 programs, the upcoming changes in July 2021 will be coming up in the next 7 months' time. And the changes are going to be surrounded with this. The government introduced changes to improve the quality of the investment and applicants. So when we talk about this, improving the quality of investment applicants, that refers to increasing the investment amount, yeah, and also increase certain criteria, the basic criteria, such as the amount of assets that you have. Yeah, all these are expected to be increased, yeah, in July 2021. The programs will focus on higher value investor. Look, the program is expected to focus on higher value investor, business owner, and entrepreneur. These are all came out in the budgets that was just announced in October. Okay, and guiding the governments towards making these changes. All right. But of course, in July, the immigration fee is going to be a surge as well by 11%. So we are anticipating this is a very active year, a fiscal year before the end of June 2021, as Australia fiscal year runs from July to June, right? So our office has also received tremendous amount of the application from not just from Malaysia, but across the region, trying to beat the changes that is coming up in July 2021. Okay, coming to the next poll. So Audrey, please. Are you a business owner? How many of you out there are business owner? And whether or not anybody of you considering setting up a business in Australia? $23 for, okay. So we got the results, we got the outcome here. Majority of you, I suppose, are professional, all right? So you would, in this case, you will be exploring the skill migration or perhaps investor programs. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Now, I would like to pass over to my colleague James Allen Hall. That's all, my sharing with you on the budget's directions, on the skill migration programs, as well as as well as the business and investment programs. And I hope that you find this informative. And next, I would like to invite James Allen Hall to take over and to guide you through on the rest of the topics. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Desmond.
Hi, James.
And good morning, everyone. And it's great to be with you this morning. Just before I start, I want to reiterate what Desmond said. So the current program year is until June of 2021, and all of these programs are active. They are not halted or suspended because of the COVID situation. So while there are some entry restrictions to Australia for some visas, we can still apply and get all of the visas. So all of these visas we're talking about are available now, and some of them have some great opportunities because of the increased availability and focus of the Australian government on the economic recovery of Australia. So the government is very focused on things that will assist the economy in recovering and rebuilding, and it's a great opportunity for many of these pathways, especially those that Desmond has just talked about. So I'm going to talk first about the Global Talent Pathway. And this is a really exciting pathway. So it's relatively new. It started in 2018, and we'll just move to the next slide and you'll be able to see some information about this.
James, are you able to take a control on the slide?
Yeah, okay.
If not, let me try to pass the control over to you again.
No, but that's fine.
Let me just pass the control over to you, yeah.
Okay. So I'll keep talking about this while we're just doing this. Okay. So the Global Talent Pathway is a very, very exciting pathway. It started in 2018, and it's designed to bring highly skilled and high achievers in specific fields and talented in specific fields across to Australia. Now, it started in 2018. It was a kind of trial program back then, and there were 5,000 places per year. Now, what's very exciting is that in the recent Australian budget, the planning level, so the effective quota for this program, has tripled. So we're now, instead of 5,000 places, we're now at 15,000 places. So there's a huge increase in the available places with this program. And Desmond, can you?
Yes, James, the contract has set, over to you already.
Okay. Let me just see if we can. Okay. So as I said, the number of places increased from 5,000 to 15,000 places for this program year, and that's until June 2021. So it's a fantastic opportunity. It is a direct permanent residence visa, which is fantastic, and it's prioritized. So we're seeing processing times of around 3, maybe 4 months for this, which is a direct PR pathway, which is incredible compared to some of the other visa pathways that will take much longer. A lot of the requirements are waived. There's no age limit, and there's no English test, even though obviously for many people, English is not an issue. Just not having to do any English test is a fantastic benefit with this. And as I said, there is priority processing for this. Now, the applicants must be highly accomplished or have high achievements in specific target sectors, and there's 7 target sectors for this. Now, when we say high achievements, they don't have to be number 1 in their field, but they have to be a fairly high standard. But we also consider people that are very early in their careers. So people that have done, let's say, a master's degree or PhD in particular subjects that are related to these 7 target sectors can also be considered for this, even though they may not have a high record of achievement yet, but they're starting and they're on their way. The person must also be prominent in their field and maintaining that prominence. So that means if you have been working in one of these fields, you must still continue to be involved in some way in that field. And just touching upon that, I talked about PhD and master's degrees. It's not necessary that you have high qualifications in these fields. You could have an accomplished career in one of these fields and have some high achievements in these, such as performance, such as major projects that you've led, and you're actually showing this through your career. And that's possible to do. For example, I'm assisting a client at the moment who's involved in COVID-19 research, white papers, in terms of coordinating trials across Asia Pacific. And we're able to use that as a pathway under this, under the medical pharmaceutical side. The person must also have a nominator in Australia. Now, this is not something that is too difficult. The nominator in Australia is someone that's in the same field and can look at this person's credentials and say, yes, this person really is qualified. They don't have to personally know them. And it's usually not difficult to find that nominator. So we would approach professional associations in Australia. We would talk to perhaps professors in research universities in Australia in the same field, or peak professional associations. So there's a lot of options for this, and it's not difficult to arrange this. And lastly, the person must also be capable of earning a high salary in Australia. Now, that would be expected anyway for someone that's got a high level of achievement. So it doesn't mean that you're getting that salary now, but it means that you've got that capability of earning that high salary in Australia. And do remember that generally salaries in Australia are much higher than comparable salaries often in the Asia region. So Australians are relatively high paid anyway. So the general process for this, it involves an expression of interest, which is a submission of information and evidence of the person's career and history and study and so on, that is then submitted to a government team in Australia, and one of the talent officers looks at this and determines whether or not this person is suitable for this program. And if they give an indicative yes for that, we'll get the nomination sorted out with the nominator from Australia. We'll then make the visa application, and that goes through to a permanent residency visa. I should also point out that because it's a permanent residence visa, the holder is exempt from the travel restrictions for Australia. So they can go down to Australia if they want to during this COVID period, once that visa is granted. These are the target sectors within the program. So the skills must be aligned with one of these 7 target sectors. I'll just quickly run through these and give you an idea of the kinds of skills we're looking for in each of these target sectors. So the first one is agricultural technology. And this is primarily concerned with food production. And it's not just the agricultural aspect, the actual farming aspect, it is right through. So we've got the whole supply chain right through to delivery and the logistics and supply chain around the food production as well. So it can be any of these stages. And generally we're looking at the application of technology to these areas. So the application of technology to farming, to food delivery, ordering, supply chain management, and so on. We've got space and advanced manufacturing. Now, these are actually 2 separate areas, but because these are highly developed and highly advanced areas, the government has grouped them together because they see a lot of similarity between these. Now, with Australia, as I said, the salaries in Australia are relatively high. You know, they're much higher than many Asian countries. And for that reason, in the past, a lot of manufacturing has moved out of Australia to places like China and Vietnam because the cost of labor is so much lower. But there's a lot of opportunity now in Australia through automation, robotics, and so on, using advanced manufacturing technology to actually bring all of this manufacturing back. Because once you have automation in place, the labor costs are less significant and it can become more cost effective, again, to do the manufacturing back in Australia. So this is a very high focus for the government because they can see a lot of potential here for assisting the economic recovery in Australia. We also have fintech, and fintech is financial technology. And it's the application of technology, software, systems, and so on to the financial industry. And that can be all kinds. It can be investment advice, it can be regulations, of course, things like your Bitcoin, blockchain technology as well. So there's a lot of space within this, and there's a lot happening, and there's quite a bit of people, quite a large number of people migrating to Australia using various options under financial technology, not just the global talent visas, but also entrepreneur and other visas as well. We have energy and mining as another area. And despite the name, this also does include renewable technology. So things like the wind power generation, solar power generation, hydrogen, that's an upcoming technology that's very, very positive, and there's a lot of focus on that. So it's the application of technology to these areas. It can also be things related to traditional mining, so things like improving the output of mining, improving the efficiency of processing, application of technology to the production, and so on. So there's a lot available for that. Medical technology, and that again is the application of technology to the medical industry. That includes a lot of things. I mentioned before about pharmaceuticals, that's part of it as well. So traditional aspects can also be in this as well. It doesn't have to be pure technology as such. So things like leading drug trials, clinical trials that have significant outcomes can also be part of this and considered high achievements in this area. Cybersecurity, very, very big area. And there's a big focus on that, of course. And again, all aspects of this. So it's prevention, it's investigation, intrusion detection, all of these aspects of cybersecurity. And then we have quantum information, or quantum computing, advanced digital, data science, and ICT. This is grouped together. And this covers most areas of ICT or IT, so computing, particularly high focus on things like data science, so big data, managing information about consumer habits, and other things that can assist with economic aspects of ICT. Quantum computing is quite a big thing. I have another client at the moment who's got a patent in the quantum computing field, and we're actually helping her do the Global Talent Visa as well. So very, very exciting areas. I also want to point out that even if you're not under one of these 7 target sectors, we have another visa, which is very closely related to this, called the Distinguished Talent. And that will cover people that have high achievements or high qualifications in almost any area. So it could be things like sports people, it can be people in the media, the arts, and other areas. So we do have another option for them that can also be considered if you're not under one of these 7 target sectors, but you are a high achiever in your particular field. Okay, so let's do a poll, and we'll just get the poll to come up. And if you can just give me some feedback, I'd love to hear what you think about this particular pathway. Now, of course, this will not apply to everyone, but for those that consider themselves in one of these fields, it'd be great to hear your response. I should also point out too, that if you are considering other options like skilled migration, but you are in fields like ICT, and you think you might be suitable, it's worth mentioning that, and we can discuss it, and we can still explore the option to see whether or not we can upgrade you effectively to one of the global talent pathways. Okay, so we've got some results in, and yeah, the majority are under ICT. So ICT is cybersecurity, and we've got some in fintech as well. So fintech's the second runner-up, so that's quite popular, and that's expected because there's a lot of room for development in this area. Great. Okay, so let's move on. And we're going to talk about employer-sponsored pathways. Now, there's a particular reason we want to focus on the employer-sponsored pathways. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but I'll just give you an overview of the options we have under the employer-sponsored pathway. So the 3 main visa types, we have the 482, which is a temporary employer-sponsored visa. So all of these are employer-sponsored, so you do have to have a job offer of some form to be able to do them. So the 482 is a temporary work visa that will allow the person to go to Australia, live there and work there. There is no age limit for the 482. That's worth noting. So unlike many of the skilled employment type pathways, there is no age limit to this, but it is a temporary visa. We then have the 186, which is a permanent residence visa through employer sponsorship. That does have an age limit, and you do have to be under 45 years of age. There are a couple of exceptions for the age, but they are not so common. And there will be things like very senior professors or university lecturers because that's one of the few areas where higher age is something that is usually expected for that kind of occupation. But for the vast majority, the age limit is under 45 years of age. And we also have the 494, which is a regional version of the 186. Now, it is a staged pathway where it involves a temporary visa first and can later move to a permanent residency visa. But there's a wider range of occupations available for this, and it is something that can be used. But again, these are all based upon having a job offer in Australia. Okay, so I want to talk a bit about the process that you could go through to actually do this. And I'll also talk about some interesting points that a lot of people are not aware of in terms of how you can use these to actually go through to Australia. So the visa I'm starting with here is the temporary 482 employer-sponsored visa. Now that can be sponsored by an employer, and it must be sponsored by an employer, but the employer can be actually in Australia or overseas. So that's the first thing to note. So if you've got an employer here in Malaysia or Singapore or some other country, that employer can actually send you to Australia under this visa, even though that employer is not operating in Australia. So you can have an overseas sponsor for this. They must justify why you need to be in Australia, but the reason could be simply to support clients in Australia. It could be to open an Australian office, or it could be just to market and sell the services or products in Australia. Now, I should also point out with some of these, labour market testing can be required in some cases, which is where the company will need to prove they can't find someone with those skills locally in Australia. But this is not difficult generally, because usually with these roles, they'll need specific skills, specific knowledge. They may need understanding of both Australia and Malaysia or an overseas country. So it's usually not difficult to complete the labour market testing. Now, an Australian company can also sponsor. And it's important to note here that a new company can also sponsor. So the company does not need to have a history of being established over a long period of time. But there is a requirement that if it is a new company, that it is operating already. Now, operating would mean it's got maybe one staff, that started some sort of activity. It doesn't have to be a high level of activity, but it needs to have started. Now, I'll give you an example. I've actually helped a client before that wasn't eligible for business migration. And what we actually did was we opened a company, or helped him open a company in Australia, a new company in Australia. And that company sponsored him for the temporary work visa to go to Australia. And then after he'd been in Australia for a while, were able to progress to a permanent residence visa. So this is worth noting. This is sometimes referred to as self-sponsorship. We don't like using that term because technically it's not self-sponsorship. It's the company sponsoring, even though that person may own that company. But it is that company that's sponsoring. They're not really sponsoring themselves as such, but they may own that company. And this is permissible. So it's an interesting way that can be done. And it doesn't require a high outlay of funds because, as I said, the company just has to be operating. And operating is not difficult. You can get a serviced office, maybe have one staff down there, start a website and start some marketing activities, and then it can be considered operating. Now, these are for the 482, as I said. So overseas company or a company in Australia can sponsor for this. Now, the duration for the 482 will depend upon the occupation. There are some occupation limitations here. So the two occupation lists that we deal with here, the medium to long is a list of higher demand occupations in Australia. It's about 200 occupations. Covers a lot of science roles, a lot of engineering, IT, some business roles, but not many. These are covered under the medium to long, as well as a lot of trade occupations. The other list is the short-term skilled occupation list, the STSOL. That covers all of the rest of occupations. And that will include a lot of business ones like marketing and sales. They will be under the STSOL. Now, what I want to point out here is to actually progress to permanent residency under employer-sponsored, your occupation must be on the higher demand list, the medium to long list. So that is a limitation here. So if it's on the lower demand list, you can still get this employer-sponsored visa, but you can't use employer sponsorship as a pathway to permanent residency. You could potentially use other pathways. For example, you could start a company there and then later use that company for business migration, but you can't use employer sponsored as a pathway to permanent residency unless you're under the high demand occupation. Okay, a few points here, and I've talked about these already. With the 482, the sponsorship can be done by a new company in Australia. There are minimum salaries required for this. They start at 53,900, but if the occupation has a higher market rate, so if you look at advertising for that occupation, and normally the starting salary is higher, then you'll need to do that higher salary. Labour market testing may be required, and we can certainly assist with that. And the pathway to PR through employer sponsorship is limited to those high demand occupations on the medium to long list. Okay, so we've got another poll coming up. So if you can have a look at your screen and fill this out, and we'll see what the audience or how the audience sits in relation to this. And what we'd like to know is, would you be looking at starting your own business in Australia as a pathway using the strategy that I just talked about? And I think it's quite an interesting strategy. And I also have to say, a lot of migration agents are not sufficiently skilled or understanding of how all these different segments can fit together. But it's something that we've successfully done and we're able to assist our clients with. So we are able to do these complex strategies because we have a lot of experience and knowledge in immigration. We're both licensed, we've been licensed for many years, and we're able to fit all the pieces together to make an overall solution to get through to Australia. Okay, so we're looking at about a third of people are open to start their own business in Australia as a pathway to migration. So that's great. So if you're interested in that, talk to us and we'll be happy to assist you move ahead. Okay, let's move on. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about the student visa pathway. Now, Desmond was talking about skilled migration, and he also talked about the quotas. And unfortunately, skilled migration is one of the areas that's been hit, and the government has reduced the quota for skilled migration, which makes it a little bit more difficult to do. So one of the things that we're looking at more and more often is ways that we can get people through the skilled migration pathway, but maybe not a traditional way because it just won't work anymore. And one of those is using study. And we're looking at this as an alternative entry point into skilled migration. And as Desmond said, one of the ways that you will need to consider to do skilled migration these days is being onshore. It is much harder if you're outside of Australia. But if you're in Australia, it is generally going to be easier to do skilled migration because it's easier to get the support you need from the local, state or territory government if you're already living, working or studying in Australia in that particular state or territory. So how do you get down there? Well, you could do the employer-sponsored pathway that we just talked about, but another way is study. And if you do study in Australia and you study there for at least 2 years, then you can get a post-study work visa. Now, this is an open work visa. So you can work in any occupation down there. You're not restricted to any specific employer or any specific occupation. But you must have at least 2 years of study in Australia, or 2 academic years, I should say, because sometimes your study can be condensed. And once you've completed those 2 academic years of study in Australia, you can then move on to this open work visa. You must be under 50 years of age to do this, but also keep in mind that for skilled migration, you must also be under 45 years of age. So realistically, if you want to use this as a pathway through to skilled migration, and given you need 2 years, you need to be in your early 40s as a maximum age to be able to do this with sufficient time. Okay, so let's look at the pathway that you could use for this. So if you are doing a degree course, so a bachelor, master's or PhD, then we've got one stream under this open work visa, this post-study open work visa. which is based upon having completed a degree in Australia. Now, that's not limited. It doesn't matter what kind of study you do, as long as it is degree level study. So a bachelor, a master's, or PhD. The other kind of study, which is lower cost study, is doing diploma and certificate level courses. So these would often be associated with trade occupations. Now, these occupations, or this pathway specifically, is limited. So your study must be aligned with one of the high demand occupations on the medium to long skill shortage list. And as I said, these are high demand occupations. They do include a lot of trade occupations. So if you're considering trade occupations, we're talking things like carpenters, electricians, plumbers, and so on, then this is a viable pathway for that. Just sidetrack for a moment. One of the things I like about Australia is not a class or social conscious country. And one of the benefits of this is occupations that involve hands-on work. So things like doing carpentry, things like doing electrical work, plumbing, you can earn very high salaries in these occupations. And, I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, we had a neighbor 2 doors down. It was a big 2-story level house. They had 2 BMWs in the driveway, and they were plumbers. Okay, you would think they are doctors. No, they were plumbers. And plumbers can earn as much as a doctor in Australia. And really the message here is that just because you do a job where you might get your hands dirty, you're not paid any less, you're not looked down upon in any way, and you get very good salaries in Australia. And that's something that's great to just think about as parents. If you've got children, and maybe your children aren't academically inclined, they're not high scorers in maths and science and things like that. Now, in the Asian context, they're probably going to be in trouble because your career options in Asia really depend upon getting high-level scores, going on and getting that bit of paper in university. But in Australia, if they're more inclined towards doing trade occupations, there are realistic and high-level careers available to them working as tradespeople. So these are fantastic, and it really gives you a lot of security and flexibility for your children when they grow up in Australia. So just going back to this pathway, you can use either of these. So we can use a certificate diploma level study, or we can also look at the degree level study. Now you get that 485, which is a post-study work visa. The duration of that visa will depend upon the type of study that you've done. It starts from 1.5 years for your certificate or diploma and goes up to 2 years for a bachelor, 3 years for a master's, and 4 years for a PhD. Now, I should also mention, just sidetrack for a moment. If in Australia you're studying a master's degree, then your spouse has full open work rights. Now, that's also useful as another pathway into skilled migration, because for a couple, if one of them studies a master's degree, the spouse can have open work rights, and they can actually structure this so they can then go down there. They've got the open work rights, so they can start work as a local hire in Australia. And then using that work experience in Australia, they can then progress into skilled migration by doing work in a particular state. As an example, if you're looking at Queensland, they have pathways where if you've been working in an occupation for 3 or 6 months, then you've got pathways into skilled migration just by the fact you're down there and you've worked in an occupation for either 3 months in regional areas or 6 months in Brisbane. And other states do also have similar options available as well. There's so much we can talk about, but really the message here is talk to us and we can help you find these pathways that you may be eligible for, or help you plan for these pathways in the future. So back to the 485. From the 485, the normal pathways we'd look at in terms of moving forward would be to get an employer-sponsored visa after a certain amount of time, or one of these pathways I mentioned here, with a focus on skilled migration. We try and align the pathways such as your study and your work so that it can then fit in with future skilled migration requirements. Now, there can be some changes here, so we will, as much as possible, have multiple levels. So we'll have a strategy that will look at backup plans. So if things change, which can happen, I mean, look at COVID, no one expected that. So if things happen, we will also have backup plans in place. So we'll have alternative visa options that you can look at. Okay, so time for another poll. Let's wait for this to come up. Okay, so I want to mention, and I did mention this in the talk, that some of the student pathways, and specifically the skilled migration pathways, are easier, effectively, if you study in regional areas. And these are some of the smaller cities and can be country areas as well. And not only do you have better chances and opportunities with skilled migration, your living costs are going to be lower. These are less expensive options and less expensive places to live in. And you've got a wider range of options for skilled migration. So it's good to see that 70% of people are open to study in regional areas. And I think that's a great thing to consider. And is definitely worth considering when you are planning your study to Australia. I should also point out that as well as doing migration, we are able to do placement for all of the major universities in Australia and also New Zealand. So if you are looking at using these pathways, we can do the full process from start to finish, helping you right through that process. And that's really important because if you don't plan and do the right study in the right location at the beginning of the process, then you won't have those options later on. Unfortunately, we get people that come to us, it's too late. They've already started their study partway through, but they're studying the wrong course or they're studying the right course, but in the wrong location. And it's too late to help them with the normal pathway. And then we have to look at what we can do, but it's damage control because I've already made mistakes in terms of the choices of what they're doing in Australia. So come to us early and we can certainly assist you go through this. Okay, thank you very much for listening to me. And Desmond, do you want to wrap up?
Sure, James. I guess I think Audrey is ready to take over.
Yes, that's correct. Let me just take over. All right, thank you very much, Desmond and James. That was a very, very informative session. I'm very sure everyone has benefited from that. Okay, so what we're going to do is today we have something special. Today, for those who are present here, we'll be offering a free consultation session, which is usually priced at 250 ringgit. For the first 5 people who actually type in the chat box, first 5, okay? So whoever wishes to grab this free consultation, which is usually at 250, please type in the chat box, first 5. Okay, you can start doing that now. Okay. That's fast. Okay. So what will happen? My team will be getting in touch with all of you and to arrange for the session. Yeah. Before we go on to the Q&A, if I could just ask a small favor from y'all to complete some additional polls. This is basically to help us understand how we can organize the session much better in the future. All right. So Hazel, can we have more polls, please? Okay, so we are always curious what is the best time for you all to attend a webinar session like this. So please let us know your preference. Great. It's still on. You can still put in your preference. Okay, anyone else? Okay. Let's see what we have. Okay, so good to know that Saturday is still the preference for all of you. I guess there's a lot of professionals here, right? Working adults, so Saturday is still a good day for you. Sure, noted on that. Let's go to the next poll, please. What topics would you like to hear in the future for our future webinars? We do our webinar frequently. We usually try to conduct at least 2 webinars a month. Okay, So if we can hear from y'all, we would be definitely working towards delivering the right information as well. Okay, employment. Okay. Yes, sure. So what we do, so in Global Migration Solutions, we work with business associates like job specialists. So if this is of interest to you, definitely in 2021, we would be able to arrange a session like this, and we look forward to you all joining this, yeah? Okay, we have one more last poll before we go to the Q&A. Anyone else thinking of another country for migration other than Australia? Okay. And another 15 seconds more to complete this poll. Okay. Interesting. New Zealand. New Zealand is like more than 50%, and US and Canada as well. So New Zealand sessions are something that we have been conducting as well. All right. So you can actually go to our Facebook and see that there's the past recorded session for New Zealand. All right. And if you need any other information, just feel free to get in touch with us. Okay. Thank you. So that will be the end of the polls. Thank you so much for participating, everyone. We will now go to the Q&A very quickly. Okay. Let me just go through the questions that we have. And so there's one question on skill migration first, Desmond. So this is, what are the chances to get a PR after obtaining a 491 visa, since getting a PR in Australia is getting tougher?
Okay, sure. Now, the transition from 491 to the PR is very straightforward. Well, first of all, you have a 5 years visa periods under the 491. The transitions to the PR, as I said, is so straightforward. There are only two conditions here that you must fulfill. Yeah. Now, first of all, within the 5 years, you have to have a 3 years of full-time employment. And during these 3 years, each year, you must have a taxable income of 53,900. All right. Now, the question is, who needs to fulfill these requirements? So often the times, it could be either husband or the wife who is the principal applicants of the 491. But when it comes to meeting these requirements of having to work 3 years and having to fulfill 53,900 of a taxable income per year, it doesn't necessarily need to be the principal applicants of the 491. It could be the other spouse, right? So when it comes to the conversion, there isn't anymore an English test, or there isn't anymore, the skill assessment, or there isn't anymore, other requirements that has to be fulfilled during the initial stage of the 491. So you're strictly based upon this employment as well as the taxable income. So James has earlier mentioned about it. In Australia, generally the income level is higher, and for somebody to meet the 53,100, this is achievable. So another aspect to take into consideration is the tax. Here we are talking about a taxable income. So when you talk about taxable incomes, that strictly speaking, that refers to employment incomes and any other incomes that you would have received in Australia. All right. So I hope that this answers your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Desmond. I believe that's very, very clear. Okay. Okay, James, next question goes to you. If I do not fall into the 7 categories of the GTI, am I still able to try?
Yeah, look, and especially given the 15,000 places, so the tripling, the view from the department, the immigration department, is they're going to be a little bit more flexible with these. So it can't be completely outside of these areas. But for example, general science occupations, might be open. And look, we can certainly, if we think that there's a chance, we can certainly give it a try. We also talk with the talent officers personally. So we're in constant communication with the officers, and we can ask them to do, give us some feedback on whether or not they think someone's suitable based upon their CV. So yeah, there is a lot of spaces open there. And of course, I also mentioned there is a related visa called the Distinguished Talent Visa, which covers a lot of other areas, including arts, including sports, general business, and so on, that can also be considered as well. The most important thing is, I guess, don't just decide, no, you're not eligible. Come to us, talk to us, and we'll see what's available. Because even if you're not eligible for the pathway you were thinking about, we might find another pathway that's suitable for you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So the best is still to get in touch with us with CV, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, James. The next question is going to be for Desmond. Desmond, how long does it take to obtain a business or investment visa these days?
Okay, well, yeah, well, the current processing time, it has been just revised, and the four different pathway that I spoke about, the processing time will be ranging from 20 to 30 months. So if those who is investing 5 million, the processing time is going to be much faster, yeah, and that takes probably 20 months. And those who is going through the 1AA business innovation or the 1.5 million, the investment pathway, the processing time would be, would be up to 30 months. So unfortunately, it's a much longer processing time now.
I see. All right. Okay. Thank you. I guess we have time for one more last question. It's for James. For James, you mentioned about employer sponsorship, where you can set up your own business. Is there a minimum setup amount, investment amount that needs to be set up for the company?
No, there isn't. And that's one of the great things about this. As I said, for a newly set up company to sponsor, the company has to be operating. And, in the past, we've done things like a client's got a serviced office address, which, is like $50 or $100 a month. And, one staff for a month or two, and just start the website and start some marketing activities. And that's sufficient to show it's operating. But we do want the company to show that they do have sufficient finances, so ideally money in the bank account, to cover the costs of hiring the person under the employer's sponsorship. So, a few months salary or a 6 months salary, provided that they're confident they can get other income coming in from sales and so on, would be sufficient for this. But there's no set minimum amount that is required.
Okay. All right. I hope that answers the question. Okay, I think that I would love to proceed with more questions, but we are exceeded by 15 minutes, and I think that we have to draw the session to an end today. For the other questions that we are unable to answer it live, we will come back to you, and my team will also be in touch with you for your further queries. Feel free to always email us or WhatsApp us at the number on the screen. Okay, and for the first 5, we will also be getting in touch with you to proceed with the consultation. Okay, so once again, thank you so much, Desmond and James, for your excellent sharing today. And thank you every one of you who made time to attend our session today. And we look forward to seeing you in our next session in 2021. All right. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everybody, thank you.